Hey there and welcome to Scandal Steep. David W. once shared something interesting with me about a couple of guys. He didn't mince his words, saying they weren't just terrible on the outside but even worse on the inside. These two individuals seem to embody the phrase karma's AB, and one of them, Keef D, might be learning that lesson the hard way. For years, Keef has been running his mouth about the murder of Tupac, acting like he's some kind of gangster celebrity. But now he's rotting in a prison cell, and it seems like his big mouth has finally written a check his old bones can't cash. Let's dive into why Keef D might have just sealed his own fate and how this revelation could change everything we thought we knew about Tupac's murder. In a past interview, Keef D shared some wild stories. He talked about how, back in the day, Tupac shook his hand, saying, "What up, big dog?" It seemed like a friendly gesture, but it left Keef puzzled as to why the next day, people were after his nephew, Orlando Anderson. The whole situation was perplexing. Fast forward to today, and things aren't looking too great for Keef in prison. Word on the street is he's not just suffering mentally but also physically fading fast. But before we get into all the details of his current situation, let's take a trip down memory lane and break down this insane saga from the beginning. It all goes back to September 7, 1996, in Las Vegas. The city was buzzing with energy after the Mike Tyson fight, and everyone who was anyone was out having a good time. Tupac, at the height of his career, was living it up, feeling invincible. Little did he know, trouble was brewing just around the corner. Enter Keef D and his crew. Now, these guys were never on friendly terms with Death Row Records. There was already some bad blood between them, which is common in the rap game. But that night, things were about to go from bad to worse. Keef D and his boys were hanging out at the MGM Grand, probably feeling good about themselves after the fight. Then, they spotted Orlando Anderson, Keef's nephew, getting the beating of his life from Tupac, Suge Knight, and their entourage. Talk about being in the wrong place at the wrong time. So, why were Keef and his crew even in Vegas that night? Keef said they were there for the fights. According to him, they had been attending big fights since the late 80s. Long before Tupac and Suge Knight were in the picture. But the real drama began after the beatdown. Keef claims he was just having a nice dinner with his friends when he heard about the fight. One of the guys at dinner was none other than Eric Von Zip Martin. If that name sounds familiar, it's because Von Zip was Diddy's right-hand man, his go-to guy for all things street-related. And during that dinner, Von Zip dropped a bombshell. There was a $1 million bounty on Tupac and Suge's heads. Can you imagine? $1 million to take out two of the biggest names in hip-hop? That kind of money got Keef's attention real quick. There were rumors that after Tupac was killed, Diddy gave Zip the $1 million, but Zip kept it for himself. Even T.K. Kirkland, who was close to the situation, confirmed this story. So, now Keef had a choice. Should he let the beatdown slide or go after that sweet bounty cash? If you know anything about Keef D, you can guess what he decided to do. Keef and his crew jumped into a white Cadillac and started cruising around Vegas, looking for Tupac. They didn't know exactly which car Tupac and Suge were in, so they were just driving around, hoping to spot them. Talk about finding a needle in a haystack. But luck was on their side. Keef eventually spotted Tupac hanging out of a car window, talking to some women and inviting them to the club. Big mistake, Pac. Big mistake. Keef and his boys started following Tupac's car, waiting for the right moment to strike. They caught up to Tupac and Suge at a red light, and that's when everything went down. According to Keef, it was his nephew Orlando who pulled the trigger. He leaned over, aimed, and fired 4 shots into Tupac's car. It must have been terrifying. Tupac tried to dodge the bullets by jumping into the back seat, but he didn't stand a chance. He was hit 4 times, once in the arm, once in the thigh, and twice in the chest. One of those bullets pierced his right lung. It was bad, really bad. Now, there's been this rumor going around for years that Suge used Tupac as a human shield during the shooting. But Keef says that's total nonsense. According to him, Suge's first instinct was to protect his own head and body. And honestly, can you blame the guy? When bullets start flying, it's every man for himself. After the shooting, Tupac was rushed to the hospital. He fought hard for 5 days, but in the end, it was just too much. On September 13, 1996, at 4:03 p.m., Tupac Shakur was pronounced dead. The world lost one of the greatest rappers of all time, all because of some stupid beef and a bounty. You'd think that after pulling something like that, Keefe and his crew would lay low, right? Nope. These guys went out drinking right after the shooting. Can you believe that? They were out celebrating while Tupac was fighting for his life in the hospital. Talk about no regret. Keefe didn't stop there. Over the years, he couldn't resist bragging about his involvement in Tupac's murder. He gave interviews, wrote a book, and basically told anyone who would listen about what he did. It's like he couldn't help but incriminate himself. Fast forward to today, and Keefe is finally facing the consequences of his actions. He's sitting in a jail cell, facing some serious heat for his role in Tupac's death, and let me tell you, he's not handling it well. In a recent court appearance, Keefe completely lost it. He was there for a hearing about getting released on bail, but things took a wild turn. Keefe, once a notorious gang leader, isn't exactly the tough guy he used to be. Back in 2008, he was still a feared figure in the streets, but those days are long gone. The prosecutors have some new evidence that's got Keefe shaking in his boots. Apparently, they found boxes of evidence from a 2006 interview with a gangster who snitched on Keefe. This interview took place 2 whole years before Keefe ever admitted to anything. It's like a plot twist straight out of a crime show, but this is real life. Keefe is furious about this new evidence surfacing out of nowhere. He thinks it came from Greg Kading, a retired LAPD detective who interviewed him years ago about Biggie's murder. Remember, Keefe spilled the beans to Kading, thinking he had immunity? Big mistake. Keef D's story has captivated the public not just for its dramatic twists and turns, but because it delves into one of the most shocking moments in hip-hop history: the murder of Tupac Shakur. While many theories have been floated over the years, Keefe's public declarations have brought renewed attention to a case that seemed to have gone cold. But why exactly did it take so long for things to come to a head, and how much of what Keef D says can truly be trusted? Let's first address the issue of timing. It's been decades since Tupac's death in 1996, and yet the legal system is only now catching up with Keef D's claims. Some have suggested that this is because of a lack of substantial evidence, while others believe the delay was due to internal politics and perhaps even corruption within law enforcement. Either way, Keefe has spent years bragging about his involvement in one of the most infamous murders in music history without facing any significant consequences until now. Keefe's own words have been his downfall. His interviews, including the infamous ones with DJ Vlad and on various podcasts, became public knowledge and were a source of both fascination and frustration for Tupac fans. In these interviews, Keefe frequently revisits that fateful night in Las Vegas, explaining how he and his crew, including his nephew Orlando Anderson, were cruising in a white Cadillac, hunting for Tupac. According to Keefe, they weren't even sure which car Tupac was in at first, which explains why they were simply driving around, scanning the streets for any sign of him. Keefe's recounting of the moment they spotted Tupac is haunting. He describes how they saw Tupac leaning out of a car window, talking to some women, and inviting them to join him and Suge Knight at Club 662. In hindsight, this casual interaction was a grave mistake. It allowed Keefe and his crew to catch up to Tupac and Suge at a red light, where Orlando Anderson allegedly pulled the trigger. The shooting itself was a chaotic scene, and Keefe's version of events paints a vivid picture. Orlando leaned over from the backseat of the Cadillac and fired 4 shots into Tupac's car. Tupac, realizing what was happening, tried to evade the bullets by jumping into the backseat, but he was too late. He was hit multiple times, including twice in the chest, and one of those bullets punctured his lung. The damage was severe, and although Tupac fought for his life for several days, the injuries were too much. He died on September 13, 1996. Keef D, however, didn't exactly go into hiding after the murder. Quite the opposite. In fact, he and his crew went out drinking and celebrating, seemingly without a care in the world. This callousness, this lack of remorse, has only fueled the anger and resentment from Tupac's fans over the years. How could someone be so cavalier after taking part in such a devastating event? But as time passed, Keefe couldn't keep his mouth shut. In interviews and in his book, he confirmed his involvement in Tupac's murder but also implicated others. For example, he discussed how Eric Von Zip Martin, a close associate of Sean Diddy Combs, had allegedly told him that there was a $1 million bounty on Tupac and Suge Knight's heads. According to Keefe, this revelation came during a casual dinner, and it was enough to set things in motion. Now, this bounty has always been a contentious issue. If there was indeed $1 million reward for killing Tupac, why wasn't the job done with more precision? And why did Von Zip supposedly keep the money for himself? These unanswered questions have led many to believe that there's more to the story than what Keef D is letting on. Over the years, other players involved in the case have either died or remained silent. Orlando Anderson, the alleged triggerman, was killed in an unrelated shooting in 1998. DeAndre Big Dre Smith, who was also in the car with Keef and Orlando that night, passed away from natural causes in 2004. Even Suge Knight, once the feared leader of Death Row Records, has stayed relatively quiet about what happened, though he's currently serving a lengthy prison sentence for an unrelated murder. Keef D's biggest mistake, beyond the actual crime, has been his inability to stop talking about it. His confessions have been piecemeal, sometimes conflicting with each other, and have left many scratching their heads. For instance, Keef once claimed that he saw Tupac and Suge the day before the shooting, even though records show that they arrived in Las Vegas on the day of the fight. These inconsistencies have led some to question how reliable Keef's story truly is. What's more, the legal ramifications of Keef's admissions have finally caught up to him. He's currently sitting in jail, facing serious charges for his involvement in Tupac's murder. Despite his years of boasting, it seems that his past has finally caught up with him, and he's now facing the very real possibility of spending the rest of his life behind bars. His demeanor in court, where he reportedly lost his temper and became visibly agitated, suggests that the reality of his situation is starting to sink in. To make matters worse for Keef, new evidence has recently surfaced that could seal his fate. Prosecutors have boxes of material, including a 2006 interview with a gang member who allegedly implicated Keef long before he ever publicly admitted to his role in Tupac's death. This discovery has shaken Keef, who believes that this evidence came from Greg Kading, a former LAPD detective who investigated both Tupac and Biggie's murders. Kading's involvement in the case has long been controversial. Some view him as a dedicated investigator who got closer to the truth than anyone else, while others believe that his methods were questionable at best. Regardless of where you stand on Kading, it's clear that his work has contributed to the renewed focus on Keef D and the ongoing investigation into Tupac's murder. In court, Keef's lawyer has tried to paint him as a changed man, someone who has been a model citizen in recent years and deserves to be released on bail. But the judge wasn't having it. She denied his bail request, citing concerns over who would actually be putting up the money. There's also the unsettling possibility that Keef could try to profit from his notoriety while awaiting trial. His lawyer has even admitted that Keef's family could potentially strike a deal with a media company, allowing him to make money off Tupac's murder, despite not yet being convicted. The mere thought of this happening has left many fans outraged. Despite all the drama, one thing remains clear: Tupac's murder has left a lasting impact not just on the hip-hop community but on pop culture at large. His music continues to inspire millions, and his legacy lives on through his fans and his art. However, there is still a yearning for closure and need to see justice finally served for the man who once called himself the rose that grew from concrete. Keef D's involvement in Tupac's murder has undoubtedly complicated this search for justice. While he has provided new insights into that fateful night, his admissions have also raised more questions than they've answered. Could it be that Keef isn't telling the whole truth? Or is it possible that some of the other key players, like Diddy or Von Zip, played larger roles than we realize? As Keef's trial moves forward, many will be watching closely, hoping for a resolution to this decades-old mystery. But even if Keef is ultimately convicted, will that truly bring peace to Tupac's family, friends, and fans? Or will it simply open the door to more questions about what really happened on the night of September 7, 1996? For now, all we can do is wait and see how the justice system handles this latest chapter in the Tupac Shakur case. One thing is for sure: Keef D's big mouth may have finally led him to a place where no amount of talking can save him.